Okay, so hello everyone. You already got, of course, an introduction, more than an introduction to biogeometry yesterday with the keynote lecture. So I'm filling very big shoes today, but at least he's here to jump in. If he wants to add anything anytime, he's more than welcome to. Okay, so what's biogeometry? What I'm going to be talking to you about is generally, I know most of the people are going to be continuing in the workshop as well. So just to give you an idea of what we want to cover. So an introduction to biogeometry, to BG3, which I'm going to be explaining what that is. And we're also going to be looking at the shift from right brain perception to left brain perception. This is very important because when we look at when you're going to all of these ancient sites, you have to understand that there was a shift from right brain perception to left brain perception in ancient man. And you can look at this very simply. I mean, we're going to be talking a little bit about the concept of universal harmonics as it pertains to what we call the physics of quality. And when you look even at the concept of harmonics, we talk about how quantity and quality are two sides of the same coin. So very simply, if you just think of even the frequency of a color versus the color that you see, the experience that you experience when you look at the color, or when you hear a note, the experience that you hear from that note or that piece of music in its full capacity, in its full emotional, mental, spiritual capacity. And when we begin to understand that there was a shift in ancient man where quantity was first seen as a quality, and then ancient man had a shift where they started looking at how they can use quantity practically. And that began slowly to shift us into our left brain perception, where today that is the seat of how we are looking at the world. And we are trying now to access the right brain. This is very important because as you learn about biogeometry, you're going to see, we're going to be talking to you about how we measure the energy at sacred sites. And part of this is actually going to be, in a way, a left brain approach to approaching how to access the energy of these sacred sites. We have to enter from the left brain to the right, where you have to understand that they were going from the right to the left. That was the amazement. That's what they were looking at. We have to do the opposite. So as we're going to go through this work, you're going to see that's also why we're going to be giving you a little bit of a background about how we can measure the energy of these sacred sites, looking at them through qualitative scales. And we're going to be talking about color scales that we all are able to relate to and use. And so we're going to start with hopefully, like I said, a space where everybody is meeting at the same place, and then slowly go into that right brain journey. So what's biogeometry? So looking at the root of the word, you can see here that we talk about geo, earth, metry, measurement, and bio, life. So if we look at biogeometry, you can look at it as the measurement of the life energy of the earth, including all life systems within it. Now, to give a bit of a background of the founder who you all met yesterday, and he's sitting right there. So Dr. Karim graduated from the Federal Institute of Technology, ETH, Zurich, with a PhD Doctor of Science in Tourist Planning. He is a professor of architecture who held several advisory positions in Egypt to the Ministers of Health, Culture, Tourism, and Scientific Research. Was also honored by several institutes for his environmental work and was chosen as Man of the Year by the Swiss magazine Zeiger in 2005 for his success in reducing the effect of electrosmog in several regions in Switzerland. And we're going to be talking about we are keeping the lecture short, but I am going to touch upon, when we talk about the energy of the sacred sites, we're going to be talking about why this matters today. Because when we look at it from a biogeometry perspective, we're not trying to access the past. We're going to show you with the research of biogeometry what the wisdom and knowledge of the past brought into today, what it can give us. And so we have the research to show that it can improve quality of life, that it has an effect. And I think that's the most important aspect because, I've grown up in this world of energy. And one of the things, the knowledge that has always been, or the kernels of wisdom given to me by my parents, whenever we talk about people who are accessing ancient wisdom, or if we want to say channeling information or anything like that, how do you assess that information? Well, you assess that information by its effect, by its practical effect. And so that's what we're trying to show you in biogeometry, the practical effect of bringing this ancient knowledge to our modern life. And this is, I think it's quite important to also bring up this aspect. A lot of times people think that biogeometry is derived from ancient Egypt. But in a way, what happens is the more that we learn about the energy of sacred power spots, the more that we develop the science and the measurement system, the more that we then can learn about ancient Egypt. So it's kind of how there's specific, only when we can perform, for example, specific brain surgeries, did we realize that, oh, maybe that's what they were doing in the mummies. But before we could do it, we never imagined that that's what they were doing. So biogeometry follows the same steps. The more we learn, the more we can actually unlock. And the background of being a tourist planning and a professor of architecture is actually really important to highlight, because you're going to see that this is the background that actually gave the birth of biogeometry. Because being able to, so like I said, we're going to be talking about measurement scales, and being able to have a measurement scale of subtle energy is not something new. It exists in so many different fields of vibrational medicine. So some of you may even be familiar with things such as the concept of yin-yang, or female-male. That's an example of a measurement scale. So being able to, and usually I talked a little bit about harmonics, but generally in the approach of different vibrational fields of medicine, they'll deal with things such as sympathetic resonance. Sympathetic resonance, so basically like the examples I gave of yin-yang, I can take many different, for example, we have all this food there. I can take different fruits or different herbs and I can put them into their resonant box of yin or yang. We're going to be elaborating it to a color scale. But the concept of working with vibrational scales and using that to assess the body is not a new concept. And it's not one that, even having inherited all of this knowledge of working with different vibrational radiesthesia color scales, if without the background of the tourist planning and the architecture, it could have ended up where Dr. Karim was simply trying to redo the wheel by creating systems that have existed for millennia. If you look at, for example, things like traditional Chinese medicine, ancient Egyptian medicine, there are vibrational medicine solutions that have existed and have proven their efficacy for years. So instead, what he was looking at is the energy of sacred power spots. So it's that background that actually made the birth of biogeometry possible. Because as an architect and a tourist planner, there was a few things that he was able to see. So one was, for example, the importance of sacred power spots. Why were rituals based around these power spots? Why were these sites chosen? Why were the shapes that we placed on these power spots specifically chosen? Laila's going to be jumping in and talking to you a little bit about this. And then why is it that when we get new civilizations, new beliefs coming in, the same rituals are maintained with those spots? So you get a completely new civilization coming in with a new belief system, but they interact with the spot in the same way. Why is it that animals, for example, react to these spots? So what is it in these spots that helps make them energy centers that are beneficial for everyone? And that is the key, because if you're going to work on developing a design language for architects, you can't have a system that's what we call polarity or dosage based. You can't design a house. So for example, if we start, and we're going to be talking about this when we touch upon the physics of quality, but if we start talking about, for example, what colors resonate with what shapes, then if you have shapes that are blue or green, well, who's to say who that's good for? So he needed to unlock the centering quality of energy of power spots that goes beyond dosage. And how can we recreate that in our life? Because then we can incorporate it into architecture and our built environment without worrying about the specific health weaknesses of each individual. So we've gone beyond polarity, we've gone beyond dosage, and we've gone to the centering effect. So I've done a little bit introducing about biogeometry. Now what's also very interesting, as in the previous slide said, being a professor of architecture has allowed for many doctor's and master's degrees in Egypt. This is actually quite important because it's probably one of the few fields where, with a bit of reluctancy, he's able to get many design students to actually work with the medical department within their doctor's and master's degrees. So one example, to give you an example, I'm going to be showing you this in the research, but there was a student who used some biogeometry shapes. She was creating, I forget what it's called, the border cornices for a space to help with depression. And so she created this design, and then so the question was, well, how to test it? So remember, I started out by saying it has to have an effect. That's our goal. When we're developing, when we're trying to recreate this energy quality, we're trying to recreate it because of the effect that it has. So as a design thesis on its own, the design itself might have just been enough with extra information about the history of the shape, extra information about depression and art, for example. But now, as looking at it from a biogeometry perspective, it was, okay, well, how do we get this text tested? So he actually was able to get her to go to the medical department. And then the medical department helped her set up where she was testing the effect on depressed mice. And it showed a great effect in normalizing serotonin levels compared to drugs on the market. So this is now going back to the ancient Egyptian temple sciences worldview, where we've bridged that gap. So when we talk about bridging the gap between science and spirituality, the way that you're bridging that gap in biogeometry is by using spirituality practically. So BG3, the energy of sacred power spots. How we working on detecting this is going to be the workshop. So the workshop is going to be, we're going to give you all a pendulum in hand, and that pendulum is specifically calibrated to the energy of a sacred power spot. So when I say calibrated, those of you who are familiar with pendulums may be more familiar with what we refer to as mental dowsing. Mental dowsing is where you're trying to create a specific relationship between your pendulum and the subconscious. We work in a little bit of a different way, where you work with the pendulum using different wavelengths, which are then calibrated to this energy, and you are basically the sensory tool. So this is going to make more sense when we get into the practical work. But the energy of the sacred power spots, we refer to it as BG3. So as I mentioned, we use a vibrational color scale. And in sacred power spots, the centering quality is composed of 3 colors that are naturally always occurring together. And this is why we refer to it as the BioGeometry 3 or BG3. And it's found at the center of all energy systems and is part of the core forming process of nature, and is part of sacred power spots and sacred rituals, spiritual practices. And we find it in the center of a circle, as well as a hierarchy of centers in all shapes. So this is also going to be something you're going to be testing in the workshop, but it's quite important because when we look at a circle, or any shape for that matter, but the circle, what it actually tells us is the multidimensional nature of this energy quality. When we look at a circle, once you start detecting BG3, you find it at the center of the circle. But the thing about the center of the circle is you can't actually pinpoint the center of the circle on the physical level. As soon as you say, okay, well, here's the center of the circle, then suddenly we've created a center of a center. And so by looking at the circle, we begin to understand this multidimensional wormhole effect related to BG3. And it's the field is quite interesting because I can tell you as well, when we look at a line, for example, we also begin to see that before the physical line, when we start to measure this energy quality of BG3, we find that the line exists a little bit before we see it on the physical level. And so again, this tells us a bit more about what we call the forming process in nature. So the cornerstone of biogeometry, I kind of touched upon this slide, so I won't spend too much time on it. The concept of balancing versus centering. So this is where I mentioned that when we developed a science that you can apply as a design language, if you were in the field of balancing, if you're polarity based, then it would be impossible to design a house that's beneficial for all the users. If anything, you'd need a diagnosis of each individual before you start developing. So when we're dealing with now BG3, that gives us a design language that we can apply that will bring into, so if you go into a sacred power spot, if you have an organ that's over-functioning or under-functioning, the energy of that sacred power spot will help bring it back into balance. So that's what we refer to as the centering effect. And our goal when we look at design, so this is what you're seeing here in this slide, is when we look at any shape has at its center this energy quality. So even your body has, all throughout, you have different points that have this BG3 within them, and you're going to be measuring that. And you're also going to be measuring the effect that the sacred sites have on those centers. But when we apply the right principles, and whether those principles can be using any of our sensory experiences, so the combination of color, smell, touch, sound, taste, to recreate these environments, we pull the centering quality to cover the entire energy system. And our goal is to be functioning within environments that are full of BG3, to have that energy quality in our body. And that's what we call, that will lead to that our energy exchange has the centering quality within it. So the shift in human consciousness through history. So in the book, The Gnostic Jung, the Swiss psychologist Carl Gustav Jung categorized the development of humanity in 4 stages: primitive, ancient, modern, and contemporary man. In Dr. Karim's book, Back to a Future for Mankind, this process is analyzed in relation to the shift from the so-called right brain perception to the left brain type perception. And this is what we touched upon in the beginning. The interesting thing in this slide is if you look at contemporary man, you can see that there's a shift moving back towards the right brain perception. And I think the fact that you're all here speaks to that on its own. So again, left brain type perception versus right brain type perception. So this slide will tell you, shows you the 2 different examples of looking at things. I mean, one of the ones that I've always found interesting, and again, I think we touched upon the differences in the beginning, but one of the things that I found interesting always is the time perception. So in left brain time perception, we're really in quantitative time. And this is the perception that we're dealing with on a daily basis. So this is where every minute is a minute lost. And then if you move a little bit into right brain time perception, this is where we get more cyclic time perception, where you start looking at things as being cyclical. This can be seasons, but even every day. So every day we're starting a new cycle with sunrise and sunset, and sunrise and sunset both have very significant energy shifts in our day. And you can even see, of course, being here with the ancient Egyptian mythology, there's the mythology applies to the start and end of every day. So when we understand it in that way, the cyclic time perception actually can remove some stress from our energy system, from that linear time perception that we are dealing with, where again we're on the clock. And it also allows us to be more present and focus on what we need in this cycle. There's a really great video, and I forget the name of this video. And Patricia, I know you know it if you know the name. Where it's a neurologist who had a stroke, and her perception shifts from. And I'm seeing some people go, yes. So it's a TED Talk, and it's pretty well known. And her perception shifts from the left brain to the right brain, and I think it's one of the best ways to understand what that perception could have looked like, but you begin to see where she says she couldn't see the borders of her own body, between her body and the environment. She couldn't look at the phone and compute, like concentrate in a way to dial numbers. So it was because your left brain is, again, what's going to zone in on specific things out of the environment and take out the rest. If you just write TED Talk, neurologist stroke. Yes, but would you?
The book is the Stroke of Insight.
Okay, so the book is The Stroke of Insight, and Jill Taylor?
Bolt, B-O-L-T-E, Taylor.
Okay, so Jill Bolt Taylor. And I know if you write TED Talk also, that you'll get a nice 15-minute TED Talk that talks about this. So again, I think because of time, we won't spend too much time on the shift in human consciousness. But let me just actually go here. Let's go to ancient man for 1 second, since we're here in ancient Egypt. So this is, if we look at ancient man, numbers, geometry, letters, sounds, music, motion, mainly to interact with the laws of creation. Quantitative daily uses were secondary. Okay, so this is what we spoke about when quantitative daily uses were secondary. And these, at one point, we started looking at how we can use these practically. Our interest shifted into this, and then we come to where we are today. Modern man, the door to the right brain closes, the unifying holistic perception is lost. So one of the ways that I've heard Dr. Karim mention it that's always stuck with me is if we can think of primitive man as a spokesman of the earth. So it was the earth would be speaking through you. And now these laws of nature are lost to us in a way, or being in resonance with them does not come naturally. So again, I think we spent some time on the left brain and right brain perception. Okay, so the fading of the ancient Egyptian civilization as the perceived reality that was equally balanced in left and right brain modes shifted into the limiting left brain sensory perception. The access to the living laws of nature and invisible dimensions was lost. The true multidimensional ancient Egypt lost its hold on human perception and was doomed to obscurity. Modern man had emerged. The netters of ancient Egypt moved into the right brain realm of the unconscious, where they remain active in an unperceived dimension. Their unity is perceived through the heart. This, we're going to be talking a little bit more about when we talk about the physics of quality. We're going to be talking about how the sensory experiences, things that, again, when we talked in the earlier slide, your sensory experiences, smell, touch, taste, sound. When we look at this through the concept of a vibrational, universal, harmonic scale, we understand that all of these sensory experiences are windows. And that's why, for example, you will find temples created with specific proportions, obelisks created with specific proportions. Now, we are, from a BioGeometry perspective, we always do, when we talk about things such as frequency or a specific proportion, we're always careful. One of the things that we say is, and I think I had mentioned this, try not to always be trapped again into our viewpoint. Okay, so even that's why sometimes when we're teaching, we use the word frequency to connect with the audience. But when we look at it qualitatively and we understand the shape of a wave, we're going to be looking at this in the workshop as well. We understand that a frequency, as we modify the amplitude of the wave, we could stay within the same frequency, but have a different quality. We get a different shape. And so this is important when we look at, right now, lots of emerging research about ancient Egypt. We're always trying to prove that they had electricity. So a lot of times right now, that's the goal. We look at, and we're going to be talking a bit more about the pyramids and their shape, like I mentioned. But a lot of times we try to say that these are energy generators, and they are energy generators, but it doesn't mean that we have to be trapped into our definition of energy today. So if we do, then we might miss a much bigger picture. So I'm going to quickly scroll through a few examples again as to the importance, why we're bringing up this energy quality because of its importance in recreating it today for our quality of life. This is important as well, not just when we look at ancient Egypt, but biogeometry can help through the physics of quality. It can help bridge the gap and create a place where anybody from a vibrational medicine background, even if you're building and you have different backgrounds, if you're Feng Shui, Vastu, all of these different backgrounds actually have a platform where we can all discuss things because we begin to understand things through this vibrational measurement scale. And so that's why, so when things are actually traditions are either lost in translation or may no longer apply today because we're facing different problems. So today we're facing lots of problems dealing with, of course they had geopathic stress, but because of lots of increase in electromagnetic radiation, we're dealing with large scale effects of EMF and geopathic stress on our energy system. So this was actually when we talked about, earlier I mentioned the award for Man of the Year for Dr. Karim's environmental work. So this was the project for which this award refers to. And so this was dubbed the Miracle of Hemberg. And this was a town in Switzerland where they had installed a cell tower. And suddenly the residents started having health effects. The animals started having health effects. There's also that cell tower was also installed in the church. And so when we understand the energy of sacred sites, we understand that by installing it in the church itself, that can also create a type of break in the community, which happened because when biogeometry proved to be a solution, what the mayor actually said was, thank you for bringing peace back to the residents. But here, this is a before and after if we look here on the left, so before biogeometry was applied as a solution, this was the number of residents that said that they were free of health symptoms. It doesn't matter what they are. There's of course, it doesn't matter what they are. They're in the research. But there's things related to sleep, back pain, headaches. There's also emotional, mental effects that were part of there. So even agitation, people were fighting more. So these were the number of people here that said, okay, I'm free of symptoms. It was the least common answer. After the application of biogeometry, it was the most common answer. So this begins to tell you how this can affect our quality of life. So it's a great pilot study to show you that our society is probably what it looks like on the left. And for most people, when you have a conversation with them, there's very little people who actually tell you, I'm free of symptoms. Okay, so even if we take this room, if you can say, I'm sleeping well, my mental emotional health is great. Back pain, never heard of it. Very little, it's not, again, this is not what we normally see, at least what I normally see in a society. This is not what we normally see in a society, this is. So this is what biogeometry can do. And this is actually, a lot of times when we're dealing with, when I've gone into meetings and we're dealing with developers who don't have a background in biogeometry, I've just seen my father pull up this slide and say, well, this is what we can do. We can move the quality of life from this to this. And then after we do it, ask how we did it. And I'm going to go a little bit forward. I was just going to say we have more examples to support this. So here, this is just showing, because of course, when these results came out, some people said, well, placebo effect. And so one of the residents said to the reporter who said that, she said, sir, our cows do not speak Arabic. And so you can see as well, all of the articles were talking about the effects on the animals. So this is another, so I'm going to quickly go through these. So this was another study, part of a thesis. Again, there was cages with Wi-Fi designed for mice with specific biogeometry principles applied. And there was, again, you had the control, and then group B under the influence of the Wi-Fi router, group C under the effect with a geometrical shape, and then group D with a biogeometry designed house. So the geometrical shape would be referring to a biogeometry shape. This is just different design principles. And in the end, so here to give you an example, so with the wine maze test for spatial learning, we can see that the best result was with the complete biogeometry designed house. So this applies to all of the testing that they did. So this includes the exploration, includes a swim test, and then this was another study as well to support with the effect of biogeometry against Wi-Fi. Again, you can see the results at the bottom. So the use of the biogeometry shapes along with exposure could cope the hazards of EMF. This was evidenced by the increasing melatonin and decreasing of the HSP70 levels, as well as the restoring of brain oxidative antioxidant homeostasis. I'm scrolling through these because those interested, we have lots of research on our site, but I want you all just to be excited about the effects of these sites, these energy of sacred sites, as you're going to them. So again, this is testing before and after in an aircraft. And I forget the name of the device. Oh, it's here, the biopulsar. And basically, if you look on this, the aqua color that you see at the bottom is the color that really shows balance for different organ functions. And again, you can see the before on an aircraft and the after. And of course, this was with taking off and everything. Similar results were done with a Formula One driver testing the effect of applying biogeometry at the start of starting that engine. So not for the whole race. He just wanted to remove the stress at the beginning for that edge. Again, similar results at doing this double blind with different cars, drivers having solutions in the cars, and they weren't aware of which cars that had biogeometry solutions, and then testing and then asking them at the end of the day to report their stress levels. This was probably the birth of the biogeometry. So we have shapes that you wear on your body as well. And there's a resonance, resonance of shapes between the outside shape and the inside shape. So just imagine that there's a circular pattern of energy moving in your body, and then I place that circular pattern on the outside of the body, then they can create a resonance between them. And so these were also, used to be referred to as the biogeometry chip because it looked like a computer chip. And it had all of these different shapes related to subtle energy functions in the body, and was part of a hepatitis C project. And you can see here in the first stage, 6 months, the biogeometry chips were given to 300 persons. The result were an astonishing 90% normalization of enzyme levels, much higher than anything else tested. Now, normally you would not test the results of this. Unfortunately, the study was canceled without seeing through all 3 stages. But the doctor himself, who had done the study, Dr. Khalifa, announced the results on national Egyptian television. And so this led to the birth of biogeometry. He went out and he said, and I don't have the video. Actually, it is here. I don't think you can also find it on our YouTube if you just search biogeometry. But he goes out and he says, we're seeing an effect. This is something we need to study. And here you can see that also a large number, although not all were tested, also a large number showed complete viral clearance. And this was actually done at the pharmaceutical factory of Al-Azhar University, and it was a comparative study of all available remedies in orthodox and alternative medicine. So you can imagine that they were actually probably inviting biogeometry, not out of support of the science. But in the end, it's great to actually see that they did want to go out and support it on national television. Again, another thesis showing the effect of biogeometry on ADD and ADHD levels. This is what I mentioned, the serotonin levels, normalizing serotonin levels. This is actually an application of a biogeometry design principle that showed up in Veranda magazine. It became called Calm because the editor had mentioned that his photographer was quite an agitated, hyper person, and as soon as he walked in to the apartment with biogeometry principles, he became calm. So he called the article calm. And you can see here, designed by Michael Keith using BioGeometry principles. The effect of BioGeometry on water crystals. So some of you may be familiar with Dr. Emoto's work. And Dr. Emoto's work had to do with intention and water. Now, with BioGeometry, we're trying to recreate, so the intention of, so when you say a blessing, you get this energy quality of BG3. So BioGeometry, the goal is recreating this in the environment. So if you recreate this in the environment, then the water crystals in the environment should show this effect without us having to say the specific blessing on the water crystal. And you can see it here. So you can see the water crystals with the cube in place in the room. The cube refers to, on the left, it's a cube with embedded BioGeometry shapes into it. So we've recreated that blessing into the complete environmental subtle energy of the environment. This is another great application. It was actually growing sweet potatoes in salt water using BioGeometry. So you can see, using salt water, you just get the shriveled up sweet potato. BioGeometry enhanced salt water, we actually got a sweet potato performing a little bit better than the fresh water. And this was done by the Dr. Aidel Ammar. Another application, sorry, I'm just running through these, but we want to share with you the results, and I do want you to have time to still listen to the rest of the presentation. So this was actually referring to an application that we did in Alma, Quebec, where we worked with a company to produce chickens without antibiotics. So first, this was actually done as part of a research where we had a barn that was split into split into four actually, and some chickens weren't getting antibiotics, some were, and we were showing the effects, and then we switched to completely establishing a BioGeometry barn versus a non-BioGeometry barn. And then the research was supposed to be concluded, but they kept telling us to keep going. And then after basically 6 consecutive batches, because basically in the beginning they expected us, they said that in the beginning there can be residual effects, and so you have to keep going, but they kept pushing us to go. And after 9 batches, they again wrote a letter saying, with the production of 9 batches, the proof that we wanted to have is very conclusive, and they offered a commercial contract for 9 of their farms. There's another research that had to do with helping with the leukocyte count with dairy cows. And then this is actually a BioGeometry designed classroom. And this was in looking at the effect of shapes. So this was designed with autistic children in mind, because it was designed in collaboration with the Autistic Society and the government. That's who the project was with. But the effect itself doesn't just relate to autistic children. When we look at classrooms, we find that 90-degree shapes are actually they create an imbalance, and this imbalance does not just, like I said, extend to autistic children, but we're looking at the perfect classroom design. And so this was the project. So this was here. You can see the project design. It's still not constructed, but we needed to create a testing classroom. And so this is in our office in Maadi, and it's open to anybody to come and sit and do the testing of the shape. And okay, so looking at ancient Egyptian temple sciences, we have a unified science of quantity and quality. Okay, so this is where we talk about the concept of quantity and quality being 2 sides of the same coin that we touched upon in the beginning. So for example, in a qualitative science, we understand the energetic aspects of number, quantitative, practical, mathematical number. Qualitative, music that enters into resonance with the universe. Quantitative, music adapted to occasion for practical application. Qualitative, sounds and letters that interact with universal energy. Quantitative, non-symbolic writing that expresses one meaning. So the origin of the healing power of pyramids. So location, sacred, earth, subtle energy power spots. The earth's healing subtle energy vortices building created a resonant amplification of subtle energy quality. So when we look at pyramids, and we look at the shape of pyramids, Laila, I think you can
I can come.
jump in because I'm running through the slides.
No, and I think also, I don't know how much time we have.
I was going to say.
Are we okay to just go a little bit into the pyramids, which I think is quite important?
You can just scroll through.
I'll scroll through, or I'll talk, and then we see what the slides
you have
do.
one of these on.
I do. Okay. All right, so I'm Laila Karim. I'm Doreya's sister, Dr. Ibrahim and Doreya Karim's daughter. So here's the whole families into biogeometry. We've all been born into it. So pyramids. So here, the origin of healing. If all of you attended yesterday, I think you understood the development of monuments being on energy spots. And this is what my father spoke about yesterday, about pyramids being sort of like batteries or emitters. The shape of the pyramid really does not mean anything without the location that it's placed. And that's most old temples, civilizations, everything you look at in the beginning of humanity, how they interacted with these power spots and how, so they could probably, now you saw the right brain perception, they could probably see these power spots in nature. We have lost it. We're more in the left brain now. We can sense it. So you go to certain locations and you might feel something. Or in some places, you might drink the water from that power spot and be healed from something. So right now, it's about feeling. But maybe with the right brain perception, like animals still have it, you could actually see this energy and go to it, see these doorways. And so they found ways, and this is probably how architecture started. How can I use materials, stones, to amplify this energy and bring it into more of where we live? And most of the temples were on the power spots because it's for the public. So you wouldn't find a home being built. If you found such a strong power spot, you're going to want to spread it as much as possible. So now it makes sense that when you look at the pyramids, they stayed that long trying to build this pyramid. So the bigger, the larger the effect, the more it would be spreading that energy that is there. So throughout history, wherever you go, you would see similarities, but every civilization would be interacting with it architecturally differently. And my father did show yesterday. So back to now, I'm talking and then we'll see the power spots. So when you look, even now, if you look at nature, you will see that nature even can speak and tell you where these power spots are. You see these lakes, if they're very clear lakes, or you see these birds just migrating and circling doves and all this. These are areas where you know that animals or nature is interacting in a certain way. And you even see in power spots, the circling doves are going in a counterclockwise sort of circles. And counterclockwise is in a lot of rituals. And when the Sufis, they turn counterclockwise. It's taking you from the physical into the spiritual. So you're interacting even through rituals. So nature, even animals, birds, they interact with power spots. They're doing rituals, but it's innate. It's natural for them. They know how to use the laws of nature. They know how to build. A bird is going to build its nest in Egypt the same way it's going to build its nest in China. So they know it's like they're spokesmen, but of the earth, of all these energies. We need a manual now to build something, or we cannot just build it innately. Maybe back then they did, when they did the pyramids and all of this, they knew what is the shape, the perfect shape that would give me. But the pyramids is a development. You're seeing the last stage of a pyramid, of this development. This is the last stage. It started off really as the stone, that big stone, like in Stonehenge. You see this big stone that they carry, and they place that menhir, and that was the first part of architecture or something where they're enhancing this energy. So in these locations, maybe it's where, you look at these locations, oracles happen, connection with other dimensions, communication, because it's multidimensional. So it is out of that linear perception that we're in. It's a doorway to this multidimensional world. So that's why they would have rituals going on to be able to prepare them, to be able to go into that multidimensional world out there, beyond our normal perception. So spiritual healing, even some people, if they're right brain, you'd even see angels and things. You could even personify some of that energy in these locations. Back then, they probably saw this. But when they say, I see angels, this is our personification of energy. It's like our brain needs to personify things. So we are the ones that personify what we see as an angel with wings. We need to personify it to understand it. So we give it this. When we say an alien needs to look like that, this is our interpretation of what we see these energies. But it's just that it's energy. And we need to personify it to understand it in this 2%, in the senses. So these areas, they were always like portals. Healing effect is very strong. And then I'm going to be mentioning this energy that BioGeometry is based on this energy of sacred power spots. So this energy, this multidimensional energy, vortex of energy, okay, this was. So the pyramid shape, okay, and I will go here into the menhir, being the first stone being placed with granite, even if they carry it from faraway places and they carry this huge stone to place it in that one spot. It has crystal in it because crystal vibrates energy. So it's very important the type of stone they're using. So the type of stone, they carry it from far away to place it in that area. So see how important it is to try to amplify that energy in that power spot. Then came many stones, like Stonehenge, okay? So now they're starting to see how they can connect maybe certain locations with other locations. So there's power spots in the sky also. So there's stars that are sacred power spots too. And the ancient Egyptians were known that if they can resonate this power spot that they find in this world of ours with other power spots in the sky, then they got themselves a multidimensional sacred power spot connection. So they were, of course, you always see them speaking about their connection to the sky and locations in the sky, or traveling to a certain star, or going. They are energetically going to these locations. They're going to these power spots. Then came the obelisk. So the obelisk is when maybe a little bit of the left brain, right brain perception started coming in, and you have proportions. Now they're starting to apply proportion to add the benefit to the stone, and you start seeing. So the obelisks were known as the fingers of the gods. The obelisks were placed on power spots. And when they were taken, thankfully, they were taken from Egypt. A few were put in Washington, and you see the Vatican, you have Concord. When they took them, they placed them. So they knew about power spots. So at least they took them and placed them in right locations, because they never could really replicate this obelisk. It looked so simple, but nobody could ever replicate the same proportions with the same power this obelisk had. So they take them, but at least they placed them in good locations. Okay, and then you see development of things. And now we start talking about even adding wavelengths. And we speak about wavelengths, additional waves of qualities of energy that will be placed in these in all of the architecture of temples, mosques, old churches, all of this, you see a lot of architecture that has ways of amplifying this energy. So it was all meant to amplify this energy. So you're connecting more. If you're going to a spiritual spot, then your connectivity becomes stronger through whatever it is that you're building. So it's very important. Then came the dolmen shape. Now this dolmen shape is when they took the stones, started making like a gateway. So you're creating more. So and many times if it's placed on a spot, but even directionality would start playing a role, where the direction of the dolmen is, and on a power spot. So it will increase the energy. And then came the dome, and then the dome would be covered by a mound, so you get a sacred hill, and then eventually you'd start going into a step pyramid, and then the pyramid that we see today would be one of the end results. But within the pyramid, there is dolmens inside, there's shafts of wavelengths, so to connect with other locations in the sky. So there was so much. So, I mean, yes, there is a sarcophagus inside, and many say, okay, things could have been stolen. But now, when you understand this concept, it doesn't make sense that you build all of this over that many years to bury someone. So it was a tool. It was a tool for them to do so many things. First of all, it was there to amplify this energy in Egypt. So to spread it from there all over. And then maybe rituals also would be happening there. So at a certain time of the year, maybe they would do certain rituals. And the sarcophagus, so it was known that this is made out of some sort of granite. There was stories about Napoleon went and spent the night inside the pyramid and came out all crazy, because staying in that, it's linear time, perception where we are. Say you sleep in this, and a certain time of he stayed overnight, you suddenly go into the multidimensional time. So you're taken out of your senses. When you're taken out of your senses, that means you're going into your subconscious, and then it depends on the quality of your subconscious, what you're going to be seeing. So you could be seeing everything at the same time. You could see your death, you could see your birth, you could see so much. It could drive you crazy. So they knew maybe this was a way for them to enter into the multidimensional through rituals, to do things. So it was in a way, it was more of a tool and something very sacred for them. So the pyramid now doesn't really mean anything. And here's the dolmen. So this is just dolmens. If you see any of these arches in certain directions, and then we learn to measure energy, we're going to be doing that in the workshop, the BG3 energy that's found in power spots. So if you find that the BG3 energy exists, that means that they were gateways, that they were probably dolmens in the beginning, and then architecture and design, but they kept the gateway in that location, and then they create very long ley lines of energy of BG3. The dome, so the pyramid, so here I'm showing just the development, how this dolmen eventually becomes a pyramid. Now the pyramid shape. There's something about the pyramid shape that is very important. Okay, so there's certain types of qualities of energy that get created from shape. And many people have now done meditation with pyramid shape or the dome shape and all of this. But if that happens, now we study, obviously, we're a science of shape. This pyramid, perfect pyramid shape is not the pyramid. The pyramid is actually 8-sided, not 4-sided. And that's for a reason. Okay, there's a certain energy quality that gets created from the base of the pyramid shape. And a dome shape is very similar. It's called negative green. It's the opposite of the green color quality. Now, negative green, it's found when it's found in nature, it's balanced. It's a balanced energy. And then there's a vertical wave and a horizontal wave. But when it's man-made, when you create the pyramid, the vertical becomes a bit harmful for us. Not a bit, it is harmful. So if there's vertical green, negative green in electricity, or maybe in the sun would be balanced in electromagnetic waves. If you create electricity, it's not balanced. You start getting that negative effect from that wave that you created. It's not natural. So when we don't understand this and we don't understand the nature's energy, you start creating things, but not putting in perspective what effect it has on us. And that's why probably all this EMF that we're in right now is causing a lot of problems. We're dealing with a lot of problems related to, like the town of Hemberg, that one cell phone tower. So the pyramid, you'd see it, pyramid dome was always linked to being on a power spot. And the temple, mosques have the dome in anywhere, but it was corrected domes or pyramids. Now that little indentation that they would have in the pyramid would cancel the effect of the vertical part, the negative part. But if you leave it square, then you're getting that negative effect. So some people have pyramid healing and they put a pyramid on their head. Well, now if you understand, if a pyramid is made and a dome is made to amplify a power spot, then without the power spot, what's the pyramid shape or the dome shape? It's really nothing. You can have so much more shapes in nature that have a better effect. If we look around nature, nature has a whole language of shapes that have very good effects on us. So if we understand that, and now because we see the pyramids and you don't see it as clean, so many people think it's square, but it's 8-sided, really. And you can see that in aerial photos of the pyramid. So, but you can correct a pyramid, okay? We're gonna show you how to correct a pyramid if you have a pyramid. Okay, so these are all developments of pyramids. The step pyramid was a correction to the pyramid, to the negative green, to the vertical negative green. And the other pyramids, so you have there's the bent pyramid also. Okay, it's not here. But the bent pyramid, it wasn't that they were going up and then suddenly they made a mistake and started going in a direction. No, there's no mistakes there. It was bent to alter this effect, to change it. So all of this was meant. But when we look at history from our perspective and not their perspective, from our perception and not their perception, then we start giving our own interpretation of what this must be. But then now, because we've developed this science where we're understanding and able to measure, we started understanding how to look from their perception and what this was. Because we don't have pyramids, so we needed to interpret what a pyramid is from our perception or what we know or from our database. Because we always have to get in, just for us to understand, we want to interpret. So we want to put an interpretation to make us feel like we understand what it is that we see. So the pyramid now, I mean, we speak about power spots, but there's also lines of energy, grids of this energy, BG3 lines, where they cross. So yesterday, my father was speaking about the primordial waters and connecting through waters from the rocks, that where they cross, you get a vortex of energy. And this is very healing energy, and it's very linked from the physical water to the primordial waters, and you have all the multidimensional energies, so it's very strong, very healing. You could also have power spots. So under the pyramids, there is water. In many locations, there is water. And in other locations, if there isn't water, then it's crossings of energy lines that are also energy lines. And also in the pyramids, you see these lines where we can map them out to find where that center is. And many times we map out and we find that they already discovered it and built something, put something, and they've been interacting with it since the beginning of time. And right now we're not benefiting from what they're benefiting from. So it makes sense that they don't use electricity, for example, in their civilization. Being so advanced, they don't want to create unnatural energies. They want to enhance and interact with the natural energies that we have around us and be more sort of resonating, like how animals can. But even now, actually, with the amount of electricity being put in the world, even the animals are now starting to get affected. You're affecting their communication waves. You're affecting how they're migrating. A lot of them use energies to navigate, that's how they communicate. You put so much electromagnetic waves in the environment, and then you disturb everything. You disturb not just for us, but we're not putting the human being in the equation because we don't have a qualitative science here. We're only thinking quantitative, and if it's affecting me quantitatively, well, nature is qualitative. And really, with biogeometry, it's a physics of, I call it physics of life, not just it's the physics of quality, but I call it the physics of life because how you interact with color, shape. Nature is all shape and color, and we are in this language of nature that we don't understand. And if we just communicate and we understand and we start living harmoniously with nature, we're going to be much healthier and we're going to have a much better quality of life, let's say. So the pyramids, even the shafts, everything, where the level, where everything was placed, there's even energy lines that are not just on the ground. There are even levels. They're multidimensional also. So you have this energy grid that you could have accessed it. Now, the ancients would access that energy of life force, not electricity. They would use that for life force. They would access that grid. And they used it in architecture and planning and doing anything. That was the core of the civilization, the core of life. And of course, the pyramids also. So when I was saying even wavelengths, so maybe if I'm not going to go into too much physics and wavelengths and all of this, but let's understand that what differentiates a wave is the length of a wave. And when we speak here even about colors, we're speaking a length can be a color. So this is how the ancients thought. Like quantity and quality were two sides of the same coin. So like music, you'd have that monochord, a string, and the length of that string, so you have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, and then do again. So you have the length equals to a sound. So that length, which is quantity, is giving me a sound, which is quality. So this is just as effective. So when we speak about wavelengths, it's also color qualities or qualities. So they would have the shafts. That's why the shafts were not really leading to anything. The shaft could be a trapped wavelength to connect with a power spot in the sky. So it was a way of also connecting to other power spots. But they're using what they have here to be able to connect there. And they're freezing wavelengths. So we're freezing sound waves into shape. Because that's, I think, maybe the easier way to see it. You freeze, like architecture is frozen music, when my father was saying that also yesterday. So these are all power spots in the sky. Okay. And in the workshop, you're going to be able to measure these power spots. Okay. Shafts also. So this was, now when I was speaking about the shafts, these have lengths. They stop at certain lengths. And this is my father, but he's already in multidimensional world, so it doesn't really, we don't have to worry about him getting affected. So even this is just showing that even temples were created and canals and everything they were created according to these energy lines and all of this. Nothing was haphazard. The Luxor Temple. The Luxor Temple is very interesting because we have a lot of space. We have lots of desert in Egypt. We have so much space. But then you go and you find that the Luxor Temple, and then a church is built in it, and then a mosque is built in it. It's not because of space, like we all want to be, and we don't all love each other so much. No, it's because they all want to take a bit of that power spot. So everybody went in and built in that area. So that's probably one of the only locations where you find everyone together. But it's because they all understood. When it comes to energy, we should all share it. I mean, right now, everybody's fighting over it, and wars are happening over these power spots. But it's really for everyone. We should all be sharing it. And that's it. So that's it. I was going very quickly because we do have a break, and then we are going to do the workshop. And the workshop, you will be learning how with that pendulum that we created, how you can just hold it, because my father likes to develop things so easily where you don't have to do too much. So he developed the pendulum that resonates with the sacred energy found in power spots. So if that pendulum turns, you're in a power spot. You don't have to even think about it. You don't have to do anything. So look at something, use your senses to connect with something. If that pendulum turns, because it's pre-calibrated, the pendulum itself, it's designed in a way that it will only resonate with that sacred quality. So I think thank you, and I think it's break time.